What if I told you that for over a decade, one of America's most methodical serial killers traveled thousands of miles, crossing state lines like a ghost, leaving behind a trail of bodies that investigators couldn't connect? His name was Israel Keyes, and he redefined what it meant to be a predator. While other serial killers stayed close to home, Keyes turned the entire United States into his hunting ground. He didn't target a specific type of victim. He didn't follow patterns that profilers could predict. He simply killed whoever crossed his path when the urge struck him. And for years, nobody knew he existed. Between 2001 and 2012, families across America reported loved ones missing. A couple vanished from their Vermont home. A teenager disappeared from a Washington parking lot. Each case seemed isolated, unconnected. Local police departments worked their leads, but the trails went cold. What they didn't know was that these weren't random disappearances at all. They were the work of a man who had turned murder into a science. But how does someone kill for over a decade without getting caught? The answer lies in Keyes' terrifying methodology. Unlike other killers who acted on impulse, Keyes planned months, sometimes years in advance. Israel Keyes wasn't your typical serial killer. Born in 1978, he grew up in a survivalist family in rural Washington. By all outward appearances, he seemed like an ordinary man. He worked construction jobs, served briefly in the army, and even had a daughter he claimed to love deeply. But beneath this facade lived something far more sinister. Keyes had developed what he called kill kits, carefully prepared caches of weapons, tools, and supplies that he buried in remote locations across the country. These weren't random hiding spots. He chose them with surgical precision, often near hiking trails or abandoned properties where he could work undisturbed. Each kit contained everything he needed: guns, knives, zip ties, plastic sheeting, and cash. He would bury these death packages during routine trips, creating a network of murder supplies that spanned from Alaska to the East Coast. When the urge to kill struck him, he knew exactly where to find his tools. What made Keyes even more dangerous was his patience. He could drive hundreds of miles to retrieve a kill kit, then wait weeks or months for the perfect opportunity. He studied his hunting grounds like a predator studying prey, learning the patterns of local residents, identifying isolated areas, and planning escape routes. But perhaps most chilling of all was his selection process. Keyes didn't choose victims based on appearance, age, or gender. He simply waited for someone to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. This randomness made him nearly impossible to catch, because there was no profile investigators could build, no pattern they could predict. On February 1st, 2012, 18-year-old Samantha Koenig was working the evening shift at a small coffee stand in Anchorage, Alaska. It was a routine night, or so she thought. Just before closing time, a man approached the window. He seemed ordinary enough, just another customer looking for coffee. But Israel Keyes hadn't come for coffee. Within minutes, Koenig found herself zip-tied and forced into Keyes' white pickup truck. What happened next was a nightmare that would finally expose one of America's most elusive killers. Keyes drove her to a shed behind his home, where he held her captive. But unlike his other victims, Samantha Koenig would become the thread that unraveled his entire operation. After killing Koenig, Keyes made a critical error. Instead of disappearing like he had with his other victims, he decided to extract ransom money from her family. He took a photograph of her body, positioned to appear alive, and sent it along with a ransom demand for $30,000. The Koenig family, desperate to bring their daughter home, complied with the demands. But Keyes had already left Alaska by the time the money was deposited. He was driving through the southwestern United States, using Samantha's debit card at ATMs along his route. Each transaction created a digital breadcrumb that investigators could follow. What Keyes didn't realize was that his years of careful planning were about to be undone by modern technology. Every ATM withdrawal, every cell phone ping, every security camera was creating a trail that would lead directly to him. FBI agents worked around the clock, tracking the debit card transactions across multiple states. The pattern emerged quickly. Someone was driving south from Alaska, making regular stops to withdraw cash. But who was behind the mask captured on grainy ATM footage? The breakthrough came on March 13, 2012, in Lufkin, Texas. Texas State Trooper Aaron Valerio was patrolling when he noticed a white pickup truck matching the description from the Alaska case. The license plates were different, but something about the vehicle seemed suspicious. When Valerio pulled the truck over for a routine traffic stop, he had no idea he was about to capture one of America's most prolific serial killers. The driver was polite, and cooperative Israel Keys had learned long ago that blending in was the key to survival. But when investigators ran his information and connected him to the debit card transactions, they realized they had stumbled onto something much bigger than a simple kidnapping case. As they dug deeper into Key's background, a terrifying picture began to emerge. This wasn't just about Samantha Koenig. This was about a killer who had been operating in the shadows for over a decade, potentially responsible for dozens of unsolved murders across the country. Sitting in an FBI interrogation room, Israel Keys initially tried to maintain his innocence. But as investigators presented evidence linking him to multiple crime scenes, his facade began to crumble. What emerged was perhaps one of the most chilling confessions in criminal history. Keys didn't just admit to killing Samantha Koenig. He began revealing a catalog of murders spanning 11 years and thousands of miles. He spoke with disturbing calmness about his methods, describing how he would select victims purely by opportunity rather than preference. "I didn't have a type," he told investigators. "It was all about location and circumstance." He revealed details about the Vermont couple, Bill and Lorraine Currier, whom he had kidnapped from their home in 2011. He described how he had broken in during the night, bound them, and driven them to an abandoned farmhouse where he killed them. Their bodies were never found, but perhaps most disturbing was how Keys described his emotional state during these murders. He claimed to feel nothing, no anger, no sexual gratification, no personal vendetta. To him, killing was simply something he did, like others might collect stamps or play golf. As the interviews continued, FBI agents realized they were dealing with a killer unlike any they had encountered before. His crimes weren't driven by typical motives like revenge, sexual desire, or financial gain. They were driven by something much more alien, a simple desire to kill, combined with an intellectual challenge to avoid detection. With Keys in custody, the FBI launched one of the largest multi-state investigations in recent history. Agents began connecting cold cases from Alaska to Vermont, looking for crimes that matched Keys' methods and timeline. The evidence was overwhelming in some cases. DNA linked him definitively to several crime scenes. His cell phone records placed him near locations where people had disappeared. His own confessions provided details that only the killer could know. But Keys was selective about what he revealed. He would confirm some murders while remaining silent about others. He seemed to enjoy the cat-and-mouse game with investigators, doling out information like treats to keep their attention. What emerged was a picture of a killer who had potentially murdered between 11 and 30 people across the United States. The exact number may never be known, because Keys had been careful to avoid patterns that would link his crimes together. He had killed in Alaska, Washington, Vermont, New York, and potentially several other states. His victims ranged from teenagers to elderly couples. Some were killed in their homes. Others were abducted from public places. The only common thread was opportunity and Keys' presence in the area. On December 2, 2012, just 10 months after his capture, Israel Keys was found dead in his cell at the Anchorage Correctional Complex. He had used a razor blade and bedsheet to end his own life, taking with him the answers to dozens of unsolved cases. His suicide note revealed a man who showed no remorse for his actions. Instead, he expressed concern only for his daughter and frustration at being caught. He had apparently planned his own death as carefully as he had planned his murders, timing it to avoid a lengthy trial and media circus. With Keys' death, the investigation into his crimes became exponentially more difficult. Investigators had to rely on physical evidence, cell phone records, and the limited confessions he had provided. Many families of missing persons were left wondering if their loved ones had been among his victims. The FBI continued working the case, following up on tips and trying to connect cold cases to Keyes' known movements. They released detailed timelines of his travels, hoping to generate new leads from the public. But without the killer to provide answers, many questions would remain forever unanswered. Today, more than a decade after his capture, Israel Keyes remains one of the most disturbing serial killers in American history, not because of the number of people he killed, but because of how he killed them. Keyes proved that the traditional methods of catching serial killers, profiling, pattern recognition, geographic analysis, could be defeated by careful planning and methodical execution. He showed that a killer could operate across vast distances, avoid detection for years, and potentially claim dozens of victims without ever being connected to the crimes. For law enforcement, the Keyes case was a wake-up call. It highlighted the need for better coordination between jurisdictions and more sophisticated methods of connecting seemingly unrelated crimes. His case led to improvements in databases and information sharing that help investigators today. For the families of his confirmed and suspected victims, Keyes' legacy is one of unanswered questions and unresolved grief. Samantha Koenig's family finally got some measure of justice, but dozens of other families may never know what happened to their loved ones. But perhaps most disturbing is the realization that there may be other killers like Keyes operating right now. Predators who have learned from his methods, who understand that distance and patience can be more effective than any weapon. The shadow hunter is gone, but the shadows he created still linger across the American landscape, reminding us that sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones we never see coming. In the end, Israel Keyes succeeded in becoming exactly what he wanted to be, a killer so methodical, so geographically dispersed, and so random in his selection that he nearly became invisible. It was only through his own mistake with Samantha Koenig that he was finally exposed. His story serves as a chilling reminder that evil can wear any face, live in any neighborhood, and strike anywhere at any time. The most terrifying killers aren't always the ones who make headlines. Sometimes they're the ones who work so hard to avoid them that they become ghosts, leaving behind only questions and heartbreak in their wake.